Welcome to another day of Knitmas. I'm going to attempt to sew a Christmas tree skirt. I've wanted to sew one for years and I'm trying to get back into sewing. As you know, I am a knitter and a spinner and I have sewn some things before. I've sewn some clothes, I've sewn some like quilted pot holders, but I've never sewn a full quilt before. And I would like to. So I thought this might be a good way to kind of ease into it. I have all of this fabric that I picked out from like a community fabric sale. And so I got all of this for like $6. And I thought I could go through this and pick out some Christmas-y colors. It's not just going to be red and green, but I think I can put something together that'll look pretty festive out of this. So I'm planning on making a patchwork tree skirt, and I really like Sydney Graham's Connie tree skirt. She recently came out with this pattern, and she also has a video tutorial, which is awesome for beginners like me. I know how to make bias binding. I have a walking foot. I've quilted fabric before, but I've never done patchwork. And luckily, Sydney Graham also has a video on that. So I think I'm in good hands. But yeah, I want to go through my fabric right now and pick out what I want to use. I actually think a lot of these are fairly festive, at least for me. I'm not a huge, like, everything needs to be green and red in order to look Christmas to me. But I think the way I'm going to go about this is just pulling out fabrics that I don't think are going to work. So I have a couple of these, like, I don't know, tie-dye-ish. They kind of are giving like ice-dyed vibes. I think I'm just going to pull all of these out, even though they are cool, but I don't think they're quite the vibe for this. I can always pull more in if I need it for yardage, but I think I'm gonna take this one out, even though this one's very cool. This one feels fairly Christmassy to me with the gold leaves. And then I like the gold. I think that really works. You know, this one might work too. So I think I'm gonna tentatively leave this one in. I have a lot of just this plain red. And then here are the greens that I'm working with. I really like this one. I think this is very like non-traditional, but it's gonna be fun. This one is like perfect because it's an emerald with like these gold speckles. Green floral will be nice. And then I also have a lot of just this plain green. I think out of the blues, like I should either pick this pattern or this one. I don't think both of them work here. That's gonna be a tough choice because I kind of like how this looks like snowflakes a little bit. I could definitely pull the striped one out. Okay, I've narrowed it down to these fabrics, and I think I'll just change them around or switch things out as needed when I am actually constructing the patchwork. I also have a lot of this white fabric. These are all just like quilting cottons, I assume. I could use this for the bias binding. I think I would like something more festive. I just don't have anything unless I were to use like this as the binding. I don't know, I need to figure that out. But maybe I'll put together the patchwork first and then figure out the binding. For the patchwork, there are, of course, so many options, but I think I'm gonna keep it simple. I have followed Jacqueline Salem for years, and she's a really big sewing inspiration for me. And she just posted an Instagram post showing how to make a 4x7 quilt block. And it's literally just, it's like a rectangle, right? It's 4 squares by 7 squares. Might be a little hard to see, but that's the block. And it's just very simple. But I think that's what's going to work best. And it's also like fairly small squares, which I think will look nice with how many fabrics I have. So I think that's the plan. Like I said, I might change some things around as I go, but that's what I'm thinking right now. I also need to figure out what the bottom is going to be, like the bottom layer, because I might not make a patchwork piece for that. I might just use a single piece of fabric, depending on what I have. I don't think you'll really see the bottom ever, so I could just use like the white cotton that I have. Yeah, I'll have to think about that. Okay, I just graphed everything out in a spreadsheet to figure out how many blocks of each 4x7 block I need. I'm going to sew the standard size, which is 48 inches in diameter. So I just took a spreadsheet. Here, I'll show you. So I just created a spreadsheet that is 48 by 48 squares. And then I know that my block has finished 2-inch squares, so it's going to be 8 by 14 inches. And then I just repeated the blocks and centered them and added some extra strips on the top and the bottom here, because I think I just want to center the whole thing. But I'm not going to be picky about the exact placement because this is just going to be very random. And also the skirt is scalloped, so I'm not too concerned about it all being perfect, but I think this will work. Like I said, I've never sewn a quilt before, but I think this is a good project to dip my toes in before I sew an entire quilt. So what I'm doing now is figuring out which fabric I want to pair together, because each quilt block has 2 colors. I'm definitely going to like mix and match them. I'm not just going to pair the same 2 together for the entire thing, but I think I just want to get a sense of how the colors look together and like what my preference is. And actually I think this like lighter teal blue is going to make an appearance quite a bit because I'm a big fan of this with all the other colors. That's really cute. Love that. Love that. Okay, I don't think I can go wrong here, but what I'm gonna do now is wash all of my fabric. I don't know that I would typically pre-wash for something like this since I'm not gonna be wearing it. I'm not gonna be like washing it very often, like I'll probably spot wash it, but these were all used and I don't really know where they came from. And also I'm new enough that I don't feel like I can just cut corners and decide, you know, when to do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and wash all of them just to be sure. So this is what you get when you buy cheap secondhand fabric. This one was just full of these little scraps. I do think that's pretty funny though. Everything is out of the wash. This was my color catcher, so good thing I put this in. So now I'm just going to press everything. I realized that when I made my spreadsheet, I didn't account for the shrinkage that happens when you quilt. So I will just need to make a few more blocks than what I had, which is totally fine because I think this is going to be very vibes based. And I'm definitely going to just kind of piece everything together a little chaotically. As a like type A person as I am, I can also be a straight up meth raccoon. There are quite a few areas in my life in which I am a meth raccoon, and not to say that sewing is one of those areas, but I think a quilting project like this probably is, so I'm just gonna go for it. And I'm actually quite excited to try strip piecing because I've never done it before, but I've just seen so many people do it. And it just seems like so efficient and fun to do. Okay, it's day 2 and I've been working on my first block. Here's how it looks. I think it's pretty good. I definitely used this as a learning block. So there's a few things that I think I'm gonna do differently just to try to line the squares up a little bit more. There's like a couple spots where the seams don't quite line up, but I think it is pretty good, and it's just confirming that this is a good project to try out patchwork before I make a full quilt. So that is the first one that I was working on, and then I just cut out the strips for my second one. So I chose the little star, the red star pattern, and the like light teal. I'm just covered in thread, but that's how it goes when you're sewing. I'm definitely going to be buying some better tools when I make my full-sized quilt. My rotary cutter is not bad, but I could definitely use a new blade. So here is my setup. I just have one of these like creative grids rulers, and I'm just cutting out 2.5-inch strips, and then I will just sew the strips together like this. So I've sewn 4 strips together, and now I'm going to press all of the seams the same direction. And now I will cut across 2.5-inch strips this way. Okay, now that I have 7, I am going to alternate every other one like this, and then sew these together here, right sides together, of course. When you sew your strips together, your seams should kind of nest like this. Here is my finished block. I think it looks pretty good. I did take some extra time with it to seam rip one of them, and because it just wasn't quite, it was pretty off. And when I did that, I accidentally unpicked one of the blocks going, or one of the squares going the other way. And so then I had to take it all apart and start over. So it took me a little time. I also ran out of bobbin thread in the middle of it. So now I'm going to press this. Here's the back. And I'm probably gonna cut out my next block and then take a break for dinner before I continue. Okay, it's a few days later, and I think I finally hit my stride with the cutting. I started layering fabrics and just got a lot more efficient about it, which is good because the way that I was doing it when I started out, I was putting a lot of pressure on like these muscles in my hand as I was holding the ruler down. I was kind of holding the ruler down like this while I was cutting, and I was using a lot of pressure because my ruler was kind of slipping on the fabric every now and then. Mine does have the little like grippy things, but it just wasn't quite holding it in place. And I started to hurt my hand. So I took a couple days to rest it, and that was definitely the right move because I'm feeling so much better. And I just got a lot smarter about how I was cutting my fabric. So I have all of these strips now ready to be sewn together. I have quite a few blocks made at this point. So here are a few of them. This one's cute. Love this one as well. Most of them are red and green. That's kind of what I'm trying to keep them as. So that one's fun. I love this green one with like the gold flecks. That one's really pretty. There is another one. This one I'm not so sure about. I think I might need to pair the navy with a more traditional Christmas color to pull it off, so I might take this one out. I haven't decided yet. So that's what I've done so far, and then I have all of the strips that I need to sew together, and I need a total of 18 blocks and then a little bit extra for the edges. I did decide what I want to do for the underside of the tree skirt, so I ordered some fabric for that. I was only able to find 44-inch width fabric in the prints that I liked, and the diameter of my tree skirt is 48 inches, so that is a little too short. So I've decided, I just went ahead and ordered that fabric that I liked, and I decided I'm going to do the diagonal method, which I've never done before, but it seems quite simple. You just cut your fabric diagonally, and then you like shift the two sides to make it wider, and then you just sew that together. And I think that's gonna work well for this skirt because there's a hole in the middle. So I'm excited for that. I also ordered some fabric for the bias binding, and I actually found a fabric that's really close to this one, which I really like. This might be my favorite out of all the fabric that I'm working with, so I'm quite excited for that to arrive. I ordered it from this shop in New York called Hawthorne Supply Co., and I've ordered from them before. They ship extremely fast, which is really nice, and they have a huge selection, so I'm really excited for that to get here. And in the meantime, I'm just gonna keep working on making my blocks. I feel like I've really gotten into a good rhythm with it, and keeping everything lined up has gotten a little bit easier. So I'm having a lot of fun working on this, and I'll check in with you later. It's day 4 of working on this tree skirt, and my Wawak order arrived, as well as the Hawthorne Supply Co. fabric. I placed a Wawak order mostly for this adhesive spray. This is the brand that Sydney Graham recommends, so I picked that up. And while I was placing an order, I figured why not grab a few things since I was already paying for shipping. So I got some extra rotary blades, finally. I got some waistband elastic. This is always nice to have when I feel like making a pair of pants. And then I needed some more safety pins, and Sydney Graham recommended the curved safety pins, and they had them, so I got those. And as for my fabric, it looks really nice. I'm quite excited. So this is what I got for the back. So this is the 44-inch width fabric that I will need to do a diagonal cut on to make it wider. This is from Liberty Fabrics, so it was not cheap. For the binding, I got this from Rifle Paper Co. This is really pretty golden green. And then I also picked up maybe like a 1/4 yard of this snowflake print, because I might need some extra fabric for my blocks. And speaking of my blocks, all of the full-size blocks are done. So I think I needed 18 of these, and I finished them. And then I have all of these like components that I wasn't able to make full blocks out of. So I will sew these together and use that as like my extra space for the quilting process. I do still have some strips left over, so I can pair the snowflake fabric with all of these. Well, I have a couple hours that I can work on this, so I'm trying to figure out what I want to do next. I might start on the backing. I also might lay out all of my blocks and figure out my layout and what extra strips I need. Or I could make the bias binding, which I'm not really looking forward to, so I could just get that over with. But okay, I'm really excited about my blocks coming together, so I think I'm going to focus on that, lay them out, and then sew them together and get the top done. And then I can focus on the bottom. This is really coming together. I feel like I'm close, but there's still a lot of work to do. Speaking of work to do, my office got really messy, so first thing I need to do is clean. So this direction is 50 inches once it's all sewn together, so that includes all of the seam allowance. And then this direction is exactly 48 inches once it's sewn together. My total diameter needs to be 48 inches, so one length is over that by a couple inches. The other is exactly what I need. And I was reading that maybe I don't need as much overage as I thought I did, since it's small and I'm quilting it myself on my machine. I'm not sanding it to a long armor. I do have some extra single strips, just a few. I could make some more, but I don't know if I have quite enough to go around the other two edges. Plus I would be putting them on the long side, so I would need 7 squares total. Basically, I'm just trying to figure out how much overage I really need, and I'm tempted to just quilt it the way it is. But I think I'll go ahead and piece everything together anyway, because I can always add pieces to it before I quilt if I decide that I do need some extra room. I think I've decided to just continue as is. I have thread on my mic. There's literally thread everywhere. I don't know how to avoid that. It's like, so that's where I'm at. I'm gonna start piecing everything together. I have, what time is it? Probably 25 minutes left before I need to head out for the evening. So I'll see how much I can get done in that time, and I'll see you for day 5. Day 5, I ended up doing a lot off camera, so let me catch you up. I finished piecing together the quilt top. That took most of my time. I also did the diagonal cut on my backing fabric and widened it. That really worked out super well. It was not difficult to figure out. I'll link 2 resources that I used. One is a calculator to figure out what length of fabric you need based on how much you need to widen it. And the second is just a picture tutorial of how to do this, which I found helpful just to confirm that I was doing things right before I cut into my fabric. Once I had that done, I then cut out my pattern pieces. Now, I made a mistake here, and it's not a mistake that is going to ruin the project, but I should have cut my pattern pieces out as a circle, but I got ahead of myself a little bit and I cut out the scallops. Now, I didn't cut out the pattern piece. I still left about an inch just for the quilting process. Basically, I just made this harder on myself by accident. I was cutting this at like 11 p.m. and I was really tired and I just wasn't thinking too hard about it, and I'm kind of upset that I did that. It's gonna be okay. I just need to line up the scallops as best as I can when I am actually quilting it. So my next step is to spray the adhesive onto my batting, which I need to make sure I have enough batting. But I'll spray that on, put both pieces on, and then mark out my lines that I want to quilt. This is my pattern piece, by the way. I had to print it and tape it together. And as you saw, the pattern piece comes in this like quarter piece. So you can either cut out the full circle by moving it around in each quadrant of the circle, or you can fold your fabric in fourths and just cut this out, which is what I did. The other thing I did yesterday was I cut out all of my fabric for my bias tape. In the pattern, there is a tutorial on how to make continuous bias binding, where you take a square of fabric, you cut it into 2 triangles, and then you sew those triangles together along the bias. You mark out lines, and then you cut those lines as like a continuous circle. So here is everything that I cut out. This is just one long piece, and I need to make the bias tape. I have made bias tape before, but never this much at once. And as I was ironing all of this tape, I wished that I would have just bought it instead of making it myself. My fabric has these metallic accents, and I think that was not helping it iron very well. So I was spending a lot of time trying to get my fabric to crease properly, and that just made it a lot harder. But once that was finally done, I started on day 6. Now here is where I made a big mistake. that I will spend many hours undoing. For some reason, I thought that because my blocks didn't quite line up corner to corner perfectly, that I wasn't going to like the classic diagonal quilting. And I decided to offset the quilting across the entire tree skirt. I thought that was going to look better to me than if I put the quilting straight down the middle of the squares. Here I am being very precise and using my quilting guide. I'm using clips, hair clips, as Sydney Graham recommends, to keep the quilt rolled up as you're doing the quilting, which didn't work super well for me. But I was so focused on the technical part of making sure that my lines were straight and making sure my quilt was staying together and not slipping that I ended up quilting the entire thing offset before I realized that I hated it. So then I proceeded to spend many hours and several days unpicking all of the quilting. It was a really dumb mistake. I don't know why I did it this way, but I came to my senses and I redid it. I also accidentally changed a camera setting here while I was filming, and that's why this looks so weird. So I was just in my flop era. I decided to go with a red thread for my bobbin for the underside and this pale green or pastel green for the top stitching. So day 7, this, just for transparency, definitely took longer than a day to unpick, but I started over again and I decided to freehand the quilting. I marked my first line, but I didn't end up using my quilting guide for the rest of the stitching. I just eyeballed it straight down the middle of the squares, and this was way easier than I thought it was going to be, and also any areas where my corners didn't line up perfectly, I really wasn't bothered by. And when you're looking at the quilt overall, I don't really think those areas are that noticeable, so I just didn't need to worry about it. In the end, I decided to only do one direction of stitching. I liked this minimal look and how flat it kept the quilt. I mean, I do love a good crinkled quilt, don't get me wrong, but for this project in particular, I just liked the way that it looked very minimal and let the patchwork shine. So I just did the one row of stitching every other diamond and ended up liking that. Cutting out the quilt after I had already made the mistake of cutting the scallops really wasn't bad at all. I was able to line everything up, and you can see I just marked the actual pattern and I didn't have any issues. So that mistake ended up not really being a problem. And here is my finished quilt. Well, the quilting part is finished at least. So I cut the center circle and cut a line straight down the middle. I kept my quilting perpendicular to the opening, and I am quite happy with that. Okay, day 8, I finished making all of my bias tape, and now it is time to bind it, which is, for me, the worst part. So I just took my time with it. I cut ties because I'm making the bow version, so I'm just sewing up my ties here. And next, I clipped my bias tape to the outer edges of the curves. Sydney has a lot of good tips for honestly all of the steps, but the bias binding in particular because it is a little bit finicky. So she tells you how to stretch the tape around the concave curves and then keep it looser around the convex curves. And then the sewing, which is just a little bit painstaking. You can see I'm going very slow here. I decided to not clip the entire quilt. So here I am just adjusting it as I go. And again, Sydney has a lot of tips for how to sew this so that it will look nice, including going scant on your seam allowance and then going a little bit over your seam allowance depending on which part of the curve you're in. And then once you finish that step, you sew the binding down. I didn't do an immaculate job on this. I think I did my best, but yeah, bias binding curves is not my favorite thing to do, but I got through it. And then it was time to bind the middle, including leaving those extra ties for one of the bows. So I just went very slow, took my time with it, and after one last iron and a good hour or two of picking off all of my threads from the quilting mistake, I am done. And here is the finished tree skirt. I think it turned out really nice. It looks a little bit scrappy, because it is. Overall, I really like this tree skirt. The pattern is great. The tutorial is very helpful. I'm pretty happy with my patchwork and quilting. And this was just such a fun project. I didn't take it off to show you the underside, but here is how that turned out. I think I could see myself putting it on the tree that way some years, but for now, I really like seeing the patchwork. It's just such a cute pattern. I really like it. This was so much fun to work on. I think it really prepared me to make a full-size quilt, so I'm very excited to do that. The question for this video is, do you play any games? You can interpret this however you want. Video games, board games, card games, daily games, anything. My partner and I like to play the New York Times daily games. We were playing Wordle for a long time, but now we play Connections and Strands every night together. I also do play some video games on occasion when I have time. My two favorites are platformers, and I'm a big fan of puzzle games, and I've played quite a few puzzle video games. So let me know if you play any games. Thanks for watching this video. I will see you in the next Knitmas.